So yesterday, the world marked the 47th anniversary of the Camp David Accords.
Right, a massive geopolitical milestone.
Exactly. I mean, signed on the White House lawn back in 1979, and an event that is just absolutely crucial for understanding the Middle East today.
Yeah, completely.
But today is March 27, 2026, and we are pivoting to something quite different, but honestly, at least as potent.
Oh, without a doubt.
Because today marks the anniversary of a very different kind of explosion. We are talking about a tiny, diamond-shaped blue bombshell.
We are, of course, talking about the 28th anniversary of the 1998 FDA approval of Viagra.
Welcome to the Topic Lens podcast, where we deep dive into the historical events and the news shaping our society. I am so glad you're joining us for this one because, well, we are absolutely not going to bog you down in dense medical jargon today.
No, definitely not.
Instead, our mission is to put this little blue pill into its proper historical context. We're going to explore the story of a happy accident in a British lab that unexpectedly became a multi-billion-dollar economic engine.
And completely changed the cultural conversation around masculinity.
Right, and fundamentally redefined what it means to age.
It's fascinating because Viagra truly is the ultimate lens for understanding modern medicine. I mean, if you look closely at this single pill, you find the exact intersection where biology, brilliant marketing, and deep-seated cultural insecurities all just collide.
They really do. But before we can understand how it changed the world you and I live in, we have to understand how it was discovered.
Which is the best part of the story.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because the most incredible part is that it was a complete and total accident.
Yeah. Completely serendipitous.
So in the late 1980s, British scientists at a Pfizer research facility in Sandwich, this included researchers like Peter Dunn, Albert Wood, and Nicholas Terrett, they were testing a compound called UK 92480.
Right, which we now know as sildenafil.
Exactly. And their original goal had absolutely nothing to do with sexual health, did it?
No, not at all. I mean, they were trying to treat angina, which is severe chest pain caused by heart disease, as well as high blood pressure. The working theory in the lab was that this specific compound would relax the blood vessels around the heart, open them up, improve blood flow, and thereby relieve the chest pain.
But the clinical trials did not exactly go as planned.
No, they didn't. It basically failed as a reliable heart medication. The half-life was wrong. The effects just weren't quite what they needed.
But then the male trial participants started reporting a very specific, very unexpected side effect.
Yeah, a very noticeable one.
The nurses running the clinical trials actually started noticing the men lying flat on their stomachs during check-ins, just to hide their sustained erections.
Which completely pivoted the trajectory of pharmaceutical history. Pfizer realized that the drug was actually working beautifully to relax blood vessels, just, in the wrong part of the body.
Right. It's like trying to invent a chemical to fix a leaky pipe in the kitchen, but accidentally inventing the world's best slip and slide in the backyard.
That is actually a great way to put it. To understand why this happened, we need a quick look at the biological mechanics.
Let's do it. Keep it simple for us.
Okay, so a normal erection requires initial sexual stimulation, right? Which prompts the body to release a chemical messenger called nitric oxide.
Okay, nitric oxide, got it.
That nitric oxide then creates something called cGMP. And you can think of cGMP as the actual signal that tells the smooth muscle in the blood vessels of the penis to relax, allowing the blood to rush in.
But the body also has a natural shutoff valve, right?
Exactly. There's an enzyme called PDE5, and its entire job is to break down that cGMP and end the erection.
Okay, so you have the mechanics perfectly laid out, and Viagra is what we call a PDE5 inhibitor.
Right. It essentially acts as a chemical roadblock for that specific enzyme.
So by stopping PDE5 from breaking down the cGMP, the blood vessels stay wide open, and the blood flow is easily maintained.
You've got it exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy, because I want to make sure we are crystal clear on the mechanics here.
Sure.
Think of the erection like a bathtub. Nitric oxide turns on the faucet to fill the tub with water. But the body has a drain that's the PDE5 enzyme constantly letting the water out.
Right.
Viagra doesn't turn on the faucet. It just plugs the drain.
That's a perfect analogy.
But I have to push back on this a bit because there is so much cultural mythology surrounding this pill. Does the pill actually create the desire? Like if someone takes it, does it forcefully make them want to have sex?
I am so glad you asked that because that is a crucial misconception we need to clear up. Your bathtub analogy perfectly highlights why. Viagra is absolutely not an aphrodisiac.
It's not.
No. Without that initial sexual stimulation, without you turning on the faucet, there is no nitric oxide released by the body,
Oh, I see.
which means there's no cGMP created for the drug to protect in the first place. If you take the pill and just sit on your couch reading a book, absolutely nothing is going to happen.
Wow. Okay, that makes sense.
What's fascinating here is that Pfizer realized they didn't just have a failed heart drug on their hands. They had discovered a purely mechanical fix for a deeply psychological and, at the time, incredibly shameful societal problem.
And once Pfizer realized what they had, that realization opened up an entirely new, massive hurdle.
Oh, a huge one.
Because you have this brilliant mechanical fix, but how do you sell a product for a condition that society is literally too ashamed to talk about? You can't just run a standard television ad for something people won't even mention to their own doctors behind closed doors.
Exactly. To sell the cure, you first have to change the language. You have to actively change the culture itself.
Because prior to 1998, the medical community and society at large universally referred to this condition as impotence.
Right. And impotence is a remarkably heavy, shame-laden word.
It really is. It implies a total lack of power. It implies a total failure of identity and a failure of masculinity itself.
Yeah, if a man is told he's impotent, it sounds like a permanent character flaw rather than a biological hiccup.
So Pfizer made a highly calculated move. They purposefully shifted the language away from impotence and heavily funded the introduction of a new term, erectile dysfunction, or ED.
It was a brilliant semantic maneuver. Erectile dysfunction sounds clinical, isolated, and most importantly, treatable.
It separated the mechanical issue of the blood vessels from the man's entire sense of self-worth. If you have dysfunction, you just need a doctor to help you fix a specific function.
Precisely. But they didn't stop at redefining the condition. They meticulously engineered the name of the cure.
They brought in naming experts, didn't they?
They did. Industry lore suggests that the name Viagra is a deliberate mix of the words vigor and vitality combined with the unstoppable rushing force of Niagara Falls.
Niagara Falls, that's actually brilliant.
Some sources even suggest it draws phonetic inspiration from the Sanskrit word for tiger, Viagra. They wanted a word that subconsciously projected power, nature, and energy.
But a strong name and a new clinical acronym were not enough to break the stigma.
No, you need a face for the campaign.
Right. They needed a messenger who could break the ultimate taboo, someone who commanded so much traditional respect that his vulnerability would give every other man permission to seek help.
And they found the most unexpected messenger imaginable.
Imagine turning on your television in the late 90s and seeing Bob Dole. He was 75 years old, a former presidential candidate, a highly respected senator, and a decorated war hero. And Pfizer hired him to be their first television spokesperson.
It was an absolute masterstroke of marketing. Bob Dole spoke plainly and openly on national television about his own struggles with ED.
Which he explained was a direct side effect of his prostate cancer surgery, right?
Exactly. And the subtext of the campaign was incredibly powerful. If a tough, universally respected war hero could look into the camera and admit to needing a little help in the bedroom, well, any man could.
It instantly normalized the conversation for millions of people.
It really did.
Okay, let's unpack this. I hear that, and it is undeniably a great success story for public health awareness. But looking at the sources, I have to ask a more critical question here.
Okay, go ahead.
Did Pfizer just cure a disease? Or did they actively help expand the definition of the disease, to sell their new cure to normal guys who are just feeling a little occasional performance anxiety?
That is the ultimate double-edged sword of this entire narrative. On one hand, Pfizer brilliantly destigmatized male vulnerability. They saved marriages, they improved mental health, and they dramatically extended the sex lives of seniors.
Shifting the cultural view from, asexual old age to the sexy senior.
Exactly. But on the other hand, critical analysts rightly point out that they heavily medicalize natural aging.
Oh, that makes sense.
By offering a pill that guarantees a perfect physical response, they helped create a brand new societal pressure. Suddenly, there was this unspoken expectation that a man should be ready to perform at any age, constantly, with the reliability of a machine.
And once Bob Dole essentially gave every man in America permission to ask their doctor for help, the cultural floodgates just opened.
Laid open.
And that massive cultural shift instantly became a financial tsunami for Pfizer. It fundamentally transformed the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, when you look at the numbers, they are simply staggering.
Oh, they are unbelievable. In its first quarter on the market alone, Viagra brought in $400 million in revenue.
$400 million in one quarter.
Yes. Within 3 months of its release, Over 2.9 million prescriptions were written in the United States alone.
And the global footprint is even more astounding. Over its lifespan, it's estimated that more than 62 million men globally have used the drug.
Yeah, and in the U.S. alone, it generated roughly $17 billion in revenue over the years. Its absolute peak in sales hit around $2.05 billion in the year 2012 alone.
This massive, unprecedented influx of cash essentially funded Pfizer's expansion into a massive corporate empire.
It paid for historic acquisitions.
Right. Multi-billion-dollar acquisitions like the purchase of Warner Lambert, which was a $116 billion mega merger. But it didn't just change corporate structures, it changed what you see every time you turn on the television.
Yep. It pioneered the modern era of direct-to-consumer, or DTC, pharmaceutical advertising.
Because before this, drug companies mostly advertised directly to doctors.
Exactly. Pfizer spent well over $1 billion on consumer ads, essentially writing the playbook on how to market a medical lifestyle directly to the patient, encouraging you to go demand a specific brand from your doctor.
But in the pharmaceutical world, every massive success has an expiration date.
The dreaded patent cliff.
Right. When a company invents a drug, they are granted a monopoly for a set number of years to recoup their research and development costs. But eventually, that exclusive right runs out.
And competitors can legally produce the exact same chemical formulation as a generic.
And for a blockbuster drug, falling off that cliff usually means billions of dollars in revenue evaporating almost overnight. Pfizer's EU patent expired in 2013, and their U.S. patent expired in 2020.
Though they did reach a settlement in 2017 that allowed the generic manufacturer Teva to enter the U.S. market early.
Right. And when those generics finally flooded the market, the drop for the main brand was dramatic. Sales of the brand name Viagra plummeted 73% year-over-year in 2018 in the U.S.
Which is huge.
You would think that would be the end of the revenue stream, but Pfizer executed a genius counter-move. Just as the generic competition was allowed in, Pfizer released their own authorized generic through their subsidiary, Greenstone.
Right, they sold their own pill at half the price of the brand name version.
It was a fascinating boardroom strategy. They essentially chose to cannibalize their own product and compete with themselves.
Yeah, by doing so, they maintained dominance over the supply chain and captured the generic revenue stream that would have otherwise gone entirely to companies like Teva.
Today, the Viagra brand itself is managed by Viatris, a company formed when Pfizer strategically spun off its older off-patent division.
But they weren't just fighting generic versions of themselves. They had major brand name competitors trying to steal their lifestyle market share.
Oh, right, like Cialis.
Exactly. Cialis, which uses the active ingredient tadalafil. Cialis marketed itself as the weekend pill because its effects could last up to 36 hours, targeting a more spontaneous lifestyle.
And there was Levitra, too.
Yeah, Levitra and eventually Stendra, which carved out a niche by acting extremely fast, often within 15 to 30 minutes.
To fuel this massive, continuous global demand, the active ingredient was produced in massive quantities, historically centered at a major Pfizer facility in Ringaskiddy, Ireland.
Oh, the Ringaskiddy factory, we have to mention that.
We absolutely do, because it perfectly illustrates how deeply this drug penetrated modern folklore. There were pervasive local myths in the village that the fumes from the factory were actively affecting the men and the local dogs.
The dogs.
Yes, causing them to wander around in a constant state of arousal.
Which is hilarious, but Pfizer obviously released statements denying this as just an amusing rumor.
Right, explaining that their manufacturing processes are strictly contained. But the fact that the myths became an international news story shows just how much cultural real estate this drug occupied.
Totally.
So what does this all mean for the industry? It's like Apple inventing the iPhone. It didn't just make them a lot of money, it completely redefined what kind of company they were and what products they prioritized.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Viagra proved to the entire pharmaceutical industry that lifestyle drugs that improve the quality of daily life rather than curing a fatal disease, could be infinitely more profitable than traditional life-saving medications.
Wow.
That realization forever shifted where big pharma invests its research, its development, and its massive advertising dollars.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When a lifestyle drug becomes this profitable, this famous, and yet remains tied to a somewhat sensitive topic, it inevitably spawns a massive black market.
It creates a shadow industry and simultaneously exposes deep societal inequities.
Let's start with the black market. Because it was highly sought after, but still required an occasionally awkward doctor's visit, Viagra quickly became one of the most counterfeited drugs in the entire world.
A 2012 study showed that a staggering 80% of websites claiming to sell Viagra were actually selling fakes.
80%.
Yeah. And according to Interpol, erectile dysfunction medications make up a massive 22% of their global drug seizures.
And we need to be clear about what people were actually buying here. These weren't just harmless sugar pills meant to act as a placebo.
No, not at all.
We are talking about counterfeit pills containing blueprinter ink to get the color right, amphetamines, metronidazole, boric acid, and in some horrific cases, literal rat poison.
It forced a completely legitimate, scientifically sound medication to become a major public health hazard on the unregulated internet.
It also became an entirely different kind of hazard for the global tech industry. If you had an email account in the early 2000s, you already know the dark side of this story.
Oh, yeah. Keep Viagra became the defining plague of email spam.
Oh, absolutely. You could not open your inbox without seeing dozens of messages promising cheap, no-prescription pills, often spelling the name with numbers and symbols to bypass early filters.
It got so bad that a single pharmaceutical drug forced internet companies across the globe to literally rewrite their email security protocols.
They had to invent complex Bayesian filtering just to keep our inboxes usable. That is the definition of a cultural footprint, when a pill forces the internet to rebuild its infrastructure.
The demographics of the users shifted dramatically as well. It wasn't just older men looking to maintain their marriages anymore.
Right, there was a massive concerning rise in recreational use. Young, perfectly healthy men began using it as a party drug.
Often, they were using it to counteract the erectile side effects of illegal drugs like ecstasy or methamphetamine during long weekends.
Which, as our sources point out, led to dangerous behaviors, increased risks of unprotected sex, and significant public health concerns among younger demographics who didn't actually have a medical need for the drug.
But beyond the black market and the party scene, the regulatory story of Viagra highlights a glaring gender controversy in modern medicine.
Right. Let's look at the timeline here. Viagra was fast-tracked by regulators. It was approved by the FDA in just 6 months back in 1998.
6 months is incredibly fast.
And once it was approved, it was immediately and heavily subsidized by major insurance companies. Men had almost instant, affordable access to a solution.
Meanwhile, female contraceptives, and specifically drugs intended to address female sexual desire, faced a vastly different reality.
Yeah, take a drug called Addy, which targeted low sexual desire in women.
It was rejected by the FDA twice before finally gaining approval years later. This immense disparity sparked a public campaign called Even the Score, which framed the repeated rejections as blatant gender discrimination.
The campaign pointed out decades of regulatory hurdles, a severe lack of clinical funding, and a general dismissiveness regarding women's sexual health.
It is a stark contrast reported by multiple health analysts. 6 months of regulatory review for the male pill versus decades of roadblocks and skepticism for the female equivalent.
This raises an important question about exactly who the medical establishment prioritizes and how they view different types of distress.
It highlights how the female sexual experience was often framed by regulators as a complex, unquantifiable psychological or social issue, while the male experience was immediately treated as a legitimate, highly fundable, and urgent mechanical priority.
It really does put a mirror up to our society, showing us exactly what we value and what we're willing to fund.
Absolutely.
So let's look back at the journey we've taken today. We started in a quiet British lab in Kent, with a failed angina medication that accidentally fixed a plumbing issue no one wanted to talk about.
We watched it transform into a cultural icon championed by a 75-year-old war hero, which completely destigmatized a taboo subject.
We traced its path into a multi-billion-dollar economic juggernaut. A little blue pill that funded industry mega-mergers pioneered the pharmaceutical television ads we see every single day.
Survived the dreaded patent cliff by competing with itself, and sparked a black market that literally broke early email inboxes.
Today, 28 years after its FDA approval, the legacy of that little blue pill is everywhere you look. It is in how you talk to your doctors without shame. It's in the generic pills sold through telemedicine startups flooding your social media feeds.
It completely redefined how we view the timeline of aging and what we expect from masculinity. It was the very first blockbuster lifestyle drug. It fundamentally turned the natural biological process of aging into a medical condition to be managed, medicated, and fixed.
And that leaves us with a lingering question for you to ponder long after you finish listening to this deep dive. With modern medicine rapidly advancing into areas like extreme anti-aging, cosmetic genetics, and the massive boom in blockbuster weight loss drugs, we have to ask ourselves,
Are we using these incredible scientific breakthroughs to cure our bodies?
or are we simply using them to cure society's impossible expectations of perfection?